What's up, Academy owners? This is Master Show, and I want to welcome you guys to the 5-day Summer Camp Success Challenge. So why are you here? Are you here to build a summer camp, improve your summer camps, the one you already have? What exactly are you looking to do? So over the next 5 days, I hope we're going to give you a lot of great information to help you really kind of build your summer camps or improve them, make them more profitable, get them where they need to be at, and really help you be more successful in that endeavor. So I look at summer camps way different than most people do. Because we run a year-round program, I look at them as being a lead funnel. I want to make sure that they're funneling into our systems. They're funneling into students into our academy that maybe would have never looked at us. For me personally, I own a martial arts academy, and we have summer camps after school, but some people would never even think about joining a martial arts academy. They think it's too tough or whatever the case may be. But one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that we are giving them all the information that they need to be successful. So one thing I'll tell you is that when you build these camps right, they're going to be a great source of revenue. There'll be a great lead funnel system to build into other programs. And these are just going to be things that are going to perpetuate you down the road. The great thing about it is that you're going to learn here shortly how they are items that parents can't live without. And that's a huge piece, especially when you have economic downturns. So I'm going to put on a PowerPoint presentation to put along with it and get into some great information. So the one thing that I recommend that you do is I'll recommend that you, one, join the VIP program. That'll get you additional time to learn more about what we're doing. It'll help you with understanding, what we're doing and answer the questions as they're coming into your brain. You get a copy of the challenge notes and all the slides that we're using. And then you'll get one post-challenge group call. So like next Tuesday, when we do our group coaching calls, you'll be able to join in that. So you can use your phone, pop the QR code right there, sign in. It's only $95, but you're getting a ton of information for a little investment. So this will be a great way to do that. And I'll bring this slide up a little bit later on if you decide you want to do it later on. So let me start with a little story. So back in 1997, there's a martial artist who loved doing martial arts. I've been doing martial arts since they were 7 or 8 years of age. And so they wanted to open a school, but the income they were earning in their corporate job was so high that they didn't want to leave that security. And so in 1997, he decided, you know what? I'm just going to open a school part-time. I'm going to do it in my church. And so he ran classes on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And because of his travel schedule, he was moving in and out of his area. But he built up a pretty good sized school inside of his church, what the school would allow, what the size space would allow. And so in 2001, he took a trip to Korea and China. And while he was over there, he realized that he was much more passionate about the martial arts and changing people's lives and what it could do for kids, that he decided to go ahead and make the switch. So he goes to Korea, and then on the plane ride home, he writes his resignation letter. And so when he does that, he realizes that he's in it now. We're going. And so he opens up his school full time in the summer of 2021. And the school explodes. It just grows. So the area they're in is very small, but it explodes. And as the area starts to grow, it really does take on a massive type growth pattern. By 2005, the academy is earning over $1 million a year. And at that point in time, the area that they're in, the cost of living was not that high. And so in 2006, he hires a consultant, an industry expert. And so he realizes that a lot of great information is coming. And then the consultant comes to him and says, hey, we want you to kill off your after school and your summer camp program. And that made the business owner a little nervous because those two were really bringing in more revenue than what the evening classes were bringing in. And so he follows the advice, as a good student does, and he takes the after school program from 110 students down to about 15, 16. And then in 2005, as you know, Hurricane Katrina had hit. So gas prices were starting to move up. Some other things in the markets were starting to adjust. And then all of a sudden, in 2007, 2008, the housing crisis hits. Now, at this point in time, in 2007, 2008, gas prices have now gone up to over $4 something a gallon. People are being laid off across the country. They're either taking pay cuts, one of the two. And that's when he learned that, and his revenue went from about $1 million a year down to $250,000 overnight. This happened really quick. And so that's when he learned that, the after school program is a necessity driven business model, and you just can't live without it. But he also learned to avoid any kind of layoffs, to avoid filing bankruptcy. He was going to have to look at every single piece of his business and make sure that he was looking at every system, every process, enrollments, retention, class instruction. What were they doing to ensure that they would not ever be in this situation ever again? And so the good thing is that they regrew the after school program. The revenue climbed over time, got back to where it was at. And then this past year, to kind of just make the story a little short, last year the revenue was at 1.6 million. And this is out of one location. And they have after school, they've got summer, they've got evening martial arts programs. They do all kinds of stuff there. And then projected in 2023, they're looking at about 1.9 million. And that's out of one location. So it's not multiple locations, it's just one location. Now, before you get freaked out about numbers, we're going to cover some couple things here in a second. And in 2024, this year, they actually put on, they're securing land, they have building projects getting ready to start. And so by 2024, they'll actually be in a situation where their projected growth for the 24,000 square foot building, everything going on, will be in excess of $5 million. So one thing that they're doing is they're always making sure that they are in that growth pattern because of the lessons that they learned during that time. Now, so hello, my name is Master Gary Schill, and this is my story. And the one reason why summer camps and after school programs are so important to us is that during that time, we literally got kicked in the teeth over and over again. And I don't ever want to see that happen to another business. And so the good thing is this. My academy started out like most of yours started out. We started out small. We started in a church. We had maybe about 400 square feet, maybe 500 square feet. I remember times that the community building that we built the program in was busy on a Saturday. So we had to go to the foyer of a church to be able to do the things that we needed to do in class, to be able to hold those classes. So we had to constantly move around, or we had to go up to the daycare area that was even smaller. And so we had to maneuver. And so when I made that choice to go full time, and I had already been running after school programs and consulting with after school programs since 1989. My instructor was one of the first after school programs in the state of Texas. And I remember when he came to me with the idea, and I thought, this is crazy. And it blew up. And the one thing that I want you to understand is that you get to learn by all the mistakes that I made, all the right decisions we've made, all the screw ups we've done. You get to learn from those. And because I own my own academy, I'm not ever going to ask you to implement something, do something that I haven't tested first. That's one of the things that I do with our coaching clients, is that I don't ever ask them to implement something that we haven't tested ourselves. Now, if they decide to do something on their own, that's their own decision. But I'll never coach them on something that I'm not fully knowledgeable of or aware of. So just be aware of that part. So let's talk about how we built these programs to be so successful. One, we look at our business as whether it's a luxury or a necessity. And I know you're thinking, well, you talking about Mercedes versus Chevy? That kind of luxury versus necessity? No, I'm not. And in fact, it's just the opposite. You see, when economic crisis happened, and we've seen them happen in 07 to 09, 010, we saw it happen during the COVID time, because even during COVID time, there's still a lot of academies, 40% of all academies, martial arts, dance, cheer, gymnastics, sports related, 40% of them went out of business during that time. And there's still businesses today that made it through COVID, but they did not make it beyond that point, or they're struggling so badly they can't make it. So the thing is we have to turn our businesses in to necessity-driven business models, not luxury-driven business models. When parents are looking at times, economic challenges going on, and we're already heading into a recession in 2023. So by building these programs, you're going to be kind of recession-free in 2023 if you build them the right way. So by building a necessity-driven business model, what you're doing is the parents are looking at their budget and they're saying, okay, I've got to cut some things out. Gas prices have been going up. Food costs are going up. Cost of living is going up. Where do I cut? And the last thing you want them to cut is you. So how do you build your academy to be one of those things the parents are looking at and saying, you know what? I don't care what I have to give up. We won't go out to eat as much. I won't go to Starbucks. I won't buy as many clothes. I won't go shopping. I am not giving up my kids' academy. It's not happening. The programs are so strong. The development, physical, mental, emotional, social development is so on point that I'm not willing to give that up. And that's what we're talking about with luxury versus necessity. Make your program something they cannot live without. All right, so let's talk about the next part. So during COVID, there was a lot of academies that got shut down. We all know this nationwide. I kind of saw the writing on the walls, and because of our experience back in 07, 08, 09, I learned that, one, there was ways you can get deemed as an essential business if anything ever happened. So we went to our county judge. We got deemed essential because a lot of my customers are police officers, firefighters, nurses, doctors, first responders. We have a lot of people that are considered necessity-driven employment. And so they couldn't take off. And so all we did is that when school got canceled after spring break, we just pivoted and we switched right into academic mode, which taught us a lot of lessons for when school started the next year. We ran our summer camps that year. So we weren't as big as we've been in the past, but we still ran summer camps. It allowed us to be having this necessity-driven business model to do that. If any of you taught classes virtually, no matter what genre it is, you know that teaching virtually did not work. It doesn't work. You can't pressure test anything. It doesn't have the same interaction between teacher and student. And I'll tell you what, it drove me crazy. So one, we got deemed essential from day one. This allowed us to never close. So, our competitors were hot. They were mad because they were forced to close. We didn't have to. You can probably do this at your county or parish office to be able to do that. And again, it makes you a necessity-driven business model. So it actually opened us up to people from the outside that had to have some place for their kids to go during the daytime while they were in school, and they were with us. They were on Zoom calls. They were with the teachers. And so it taught us a lot of things that were great and a lot of things that we had to modify and adjust on. There were a lot of times that kids were like getting on each other's Zoom calls and doing those things, and we didn't want that to happen. So when school started again in 2020 in the fall, when schools were shut down and they were all going live, we had 40, 50 kids a week inside that program paying almost $300 a week. That sustained us. That supplemented the income that we didn't have coming in via after school during that time. But had we been closed, we would not have been able to make that pivot. So let's talk about framework on setting things up. Now, some of the things I want to go over today are not sexy. I'll be honest, but they are important. And even if you haven't set this up now, I'd highly recommend that you do get it set up. Number one is you need to set up a corporation for your business. And you need to set that up and make sure. Now, I have to kind of preface this with, I'm not a tax attorney. I'm not a CPA, none of that stuff. I've just been running businesses for a long, long time. But I will tell you to consult the proper people that are experts in this field. Now, setting up a corporation does a couple things for you. One, there's tax advantages. It also provides a corporate veil. Having this corporate veil between your company and your personal assets is super important. I can tell you from personal experience that I have seen academy owners that I've coached in the past not listen to this advice. A child gets hurt in their academy, or an inappropriate relationship goes on, and all of a sudden here comes the lawsuits. And I saw one academy lose everything in their house that wasn't deemed essential by the judge to pay for this lawsuit. So I'm telling you right now, set up a corporation. The other thing I want to recommend to you is set up a nonprofit entity. With a nonprofit entity, it opens up doors for you that otherwise you would not be open to if you didn't have one. A lot of the school districts in the country require for you to market inside of their entities, their programs, their schools. You have to be a nonprofit. And so I'd highly recommend that you get one set up. It will also allow you to bring in scholarship money that you can then deploy to your kids, and it won't be brought in as income. It's brought in as a donation, and it goes to the nonprofit. It also will save you, and again, not a tax attorney, but when you eventually have an after-school program and that's set up as a nonprofit, it'll save you on property taxes with your vehicles and stuff if those are underneath the nonprofit. Again, consult your tax attorney for better advice. State regulations. Each state has their own regulations. Some are like the Wild West. They're super open. They're super easy. And anybody can start an after school or a summer camp program. There are other states, California, New York, they have very strict, rigid requirements. So you want to make sure that you are going by the guidelines. In the state of Texas, where I'm at, we have licensing, but we also have an exempt status underneath that licensing that allows us to operate as an exempt organization. But what it does for us is, being a martial arts school, we have weapons in the building. And so I want to make sure that we're not being told that we can't train in weapons because of being an after-school program. It also allows you to, and make sure that your compliance is equal or better than what the state is requiring. Because I'll tell you, that'll keep you out of hot water. It'll keep them off your back. And just understand that when your after-school program and summer camps become successful, your competitors are going to target you. They're going to say things and do things and make complaints, and you just want to make sure you've got all the regulations, your handbooks, everything are on point. That way you are set and ready to go. And that's one of the great things about coaching with us, is you will have that set up. Safety protocols. You want to make sure that your staff is trained. So we train our staff on everything. I've actually got an instructor in the building who's also licensed to do CPR and AED certification. So I don't have to go to an outside entity. I can do it in-house. You want to make sure that you're first aid certified, and make sure and bring somebody in who understands basic first aid. Now, in my academy, we do teach an active shooter training, and part of that is we have, in the Army, they have the most trained field medics. They're called 18 Deltas, and they're basically field doctors is what they are. But we have an 18 Delta come in and teach our active shooter training combat first aid. So they understand how to do those things. because we've got teenagers that do that course, and I want them to understand how to triage, how to pack wounds, how to do tourniquets, how to do those things. And it makes a difference on understanding that my staff is all trained in that. And I would highly recommend, let's get some basic first aid stuff for your staff as well. Make sure that they're AED certified. They understand how to use it. One thing we're seeing, and again, this is not a political statement, but one thing we're seeing post-COVID is athletes going down with heart issues. So you want to make sure that your staff is trained in that just in case. Hope it never happens, but I'd much rather you be prepared and it never happen, or never be prepared and then it happens and you don't know what to do and you lose somebody on your watch. Let's talk about vehicle safety. Now, this is something for if you're running a summer camp, you don't necessarily have to have vehicles. We're going to teach you in a day or two how to either buy vehicles at pennies in the dollar, rent vehicles, charter vehicles, or not do vehicles at all and have them bring the field trips to you. So we'll show you how to do all those things in a day or two. But if you do own vehicles, make sure that you're maintaining them. Make sure your staff is trained on how to check the oil and check the tires and do those kind of things. They're listening for noises. You want to make sure all this stuff is done so that you don't lose parts or you don't have a vehicle break down and then the kids are stuck on the side of the road. And it doesn't make a difference how great a day they had when parents pick them up. All they're going to talk about is, oh, the bus broke down today. And you don't want that to go on. And I'll tell you from personal experience, learn from my experiences. One, we had a log set up where you had to check when you're doing the oil changes. And now I have two people changing oil, checking oil levels, because I had one driver who wasn't checking the oil. A diesel engine ran out of oil and it cost us an engine, $6,000. That's an expensive mistake to make. Had we just checked the oil and put oil in. So we want to make sure we're doing those things to make sure we're keeping up with the maintenance. Vehicles are running the way they need to, so the kids have a good experience and they don't have anything go home and talk negatively about. So one thing we're seeing, we saw a rise in it pre-COVID, post-COVID, because of all of the anxiety and social situations our kids are dealing with. We've seen a massive increase in medicine that children are taking. So one thing you'll get from us when you're in the coaching program is we'll give you guidelines and our blueprints on how to do this. But on medication, you want to make sure that all the medications are in a prescription bottle. You have one person that is designated with making sure that's distributed, and alarms are put on the phones to make sure that they're going off and it's being done. Make sure and keep a list of all the kids that are requiring medication. Make sure that in the parent handbook and registration forms that the medical and transportation releases are filled out and the medicine release is filled out with the diagnosis and the medicine on there. Make sure it comes in a prescription bottle. You do not want to have that medicine just sitting out, and especially if it's a controlled substance. For some of these kids, they take some pretty high dosages. You do not want that just sitting out. The health department walks in, they see that, then all of a sudden, and you don't want another child taking something that doesn't belong to them. So you want to make sure that you have that, and make sure that you have any unexpected medication distribution, EpiPens. If you have, inhalers, anything of that nature, just to make sure that you've got that. I'll tell you, we've only had one time in 34 years I've ever had to send a child in an ambulance. And we were on a field trip. A child gets bit by an ant and all of a sudden she starts swelling up. And it took me 30, 45 minutes finally get a hold of the mother. And while that was going on, I told the staff, let's call an ambulance, let's get her to the hospital. When I finally get a hold of the mother, she says, oh yeah, well, she's highly allergic to ants. And I'm like, well, does she have an EpiPen? Oh yeah, she's got one. I'm like, where's it at? Oh, I have it. Well, why didn't you give it to us? Oh, I just thought she would never need it. And I said, well, I need you to meet us over at the children's hospital because that's where we're headed. She got bit by an ant. Oh, okay. Well, I'll give it to you next time. Well, the thing is that we need that stuff when we need it, not if something happens. And some people can have anaphylactic shock that can be lethal. And so you don't want that on your watch. We also want to talk about basic safety protocols inside of your academy. If they're in a field trip, they're on a vehicle, you want to make sure and go over that. You want to make sure that you have roll call procedures. so that every child is accounted for all the time. Nothing will kill your camps or your after school program if you leave a child on a vehicle or you forget a child on a field trip. That'll kill your camps immediately. They'll be done because the news is going to get a hold of it. They need something sensational to talk about, and they're going to do that. You also want to make sure that they have proper equipment. So if you are a sports camp, you want to make sure if they need cleats and socks or shin pads for soccer or their shoulder pads or whatever it is that they need, they have it. If you are doing a regular camp and you need them to have shoes and socks on because you're doing an outdoor activity. And I'll tell you that if they're doing swim activities, you definitely want to make sure they're not wearing shoes and socks because they're going to get the shoes wet, the socks wet. Parents are going to get upset. So you just want to make sure and do those things. And these are things you're going to learn while being in the program. Now, this is something that's going to save you a lot of frustration, save the staff frustration. The kids are not going to be frustrated if you set up routines. And that means schedules for staff, employee schedules outlined, schedule for activities set up for each day, schedules for daily activities, schedule for field trips. And if you're doing field trips like we do, that doesn't mean we're doing the field trip. There's prep that needs to be done. You need to be your departure time, what time you need to be arriving there, return time schedule, arrival schedule. So parents can plan their stuff as well. So if you've got a field trip going out at 1 o'clock, you're going to be back by 2:30 or whatever the time frames are, right? The parents know that and make sure you're back by that. I would also recommend that you have the ability to text so that you can send out a text in case you're running late. You want to be able to do your employee lunch schedules, especially if you have instructors or coaches that are helping out with camp. You need to get them a break. Remember, as I talked about at the very early part of the program, we use summer camps as a funnel to our other programs. If they have a crappy summer camp day, parents aren't going to bring them back. They're not going to enroll them in something else. So you want to make sure that your instructors and your coaches are spot on, especially if they have a later class in the day. You don't want them tired and exhausted and lethargic teaching a class. It won't be exciting for the kids. And I promise you, the number one question every parent asks their child when they come in, there's actually two questions. One, did you have a good time? Did you have fun? And if they don't have fun, they'll tell the parent, no, it sucked. And there could be any number of things that go on with that. So we want to make sure that they're having a good time, they're learning, they're progressing, because you may only have them for 1 week of camp. And we want to be able to use that 1 week of camp to catapult them into another program that we have. Make sure that you have your afternoon and evening class schedules. If you're running an outdoor program, I would highly recommend, if you're in a hot part of the country, like we are in Texas, my soccer program that we have inside for summers, it's run in the mornings. Because having the kids out in the heat at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Central Texas, it'll bake them. And we don't want that. You need to have opening and closing procedures as well. Make sure all that stuff is cataloged and it's set and all the staff is trained on it. So let's look at staffing for camps. That's one of the biggest questions I get. Well, I'm kind of busy. How do I staff for this? One, if like in our academy, we have what's called our CIT program. It's our Certified Instructor Training Program. And I build from there, number one. But number two, you can start advertising for local camps. I would highly recommend that if you're looking for coaches who understand how to do with groups of children, your local elementary PE coach is a great source. If you can find a teacher that is active. We've had teachers that have come to us before and they're like, well, I can't run. I can't move with the kids. I can't lift anything. I can sit and watch. That's not how we run our camps. We are active and we're really moving hard and fast. We start advertising for staff in December and January. I first go back to my staff that I had the previous year, find out who's going to be there, and then I start backfilling any 1 or 2 spots. And we typically hire 4 to 5 college students a year. They're typically in athletics where they're at, so they're very active and they understand sports. And so, but sometimes they're getting internships or they're getting into things they can't do as they move forward in their college careers. So we want to make sure that we're helping them do that, but also backfilling those positions. Don't wait till the last week of May to start trying to hire. Most of the school districts will have the ability to post jobs inside of their boards where you can post things going on. Post social media in the area. Get your families in the area to push out through their local neighborhood pages as well. I really like elementary PE coaches. They're used to dealing with big group camps. And if you're not starting out and you're running pretty good size camp, 50, 60, 70 kids, they're used to doing group games of up to 100 plus kids. So they're a really good source. And in a lot of cases, they already have a relationship with some of these children because they go to the school, they work at the school the children go to. Middle school coaches can be a decent source, but understand that when football season, they're getting ready for football season, they're going to be out the last week or two of camp if you're running camps the entire summer. If you want to hire a bus driver, make the bus driver understand that they're not doing like a field trip for the school where they take the kids where they're going to be at and they're going to just sit in the bus and wait for the kids after the field trip's done. You want to have somebody who's going to be active in that part and that setup. And that's how we run the staffing for camps. Other parts we think about on staffing. Check the state and local laws, and they'll tell you exactly what the counselor to student ratio is. I like keep staff ratios about 1 to 10. We typically hover 1 to 8, but know the staff ratios. Those are super important. I don't hire anybody under 18 years of age unless they're one of my black belts. If they're one of my black belts, I'll typically hire them between their junior and their senior year of high school. They've been with me a long time. They understand our culture. They're pretty squared away. They're self-sufficient. And I don't let anybody drive unless they're 21 years of age or over, if you have vehicles. If you're just starting a camp out and you don't have that stuff, don't freak out. We have solutions on what we can do and teach you that'll help you out. You must complete staff training with these employees. And you need to do it in a grand way to make sure that they fully understand what their roles are and let them see and hear your vision of what things look like. Don't just train and be like, okay, go out there and best of luck. You need to make sure and assign veteran employees with them to help guide them through that setup. I make all employees sign a non-disclosure agreement. I make them sign and review our handbook. And they must pass a background check. In most states, that is a requirement now. We've always done it. I just want to make sure that we're keeping it really simple. So in this setup, you're going to look at staff compensation. And I would look at what the community's paying. You can typically, every employer right now, because of needing more staff, you'll see what they're paying people on the outside. And so you can do that and just let that be your guide and your gauge. But you also want to make sure and figure that into your budgets as well. And if they're offering any benefits like we offer, they get free martial arts training or they get something free. Or if I'm working with a college student and they're needing help with stuff with school, I'll help them with that as well. Not necessarily payment, but we can help them with some things they're writing if they're writing a thesis or something of that nature. Another thing that we do is our staff schedules. We send staff schedules out the Friday before the next week's camp. That way everybody knows what, and you don't have to have teams. We have 3 teams. When you're starting out, you can just have 1 team. But everybody knows what time they're coming in, what time they're doing lunch. And we can actually give you a copy of this as well, so you can kind of gauge on how you set that up. Who has opening procedures, who has closing procedures. Like if you see on the yellows, I typically try to give my instructors a 2-hour break in the afternoon if they're working camp. That way they can go sleep, they can go run errands, they can do whatever for 2 hours. Excuse me. And that way when they come back for class, man, they're energized. They're ready to go and they're teaching dynamic classes. And we do this all the way through, Monday through Friday. I also make sure that the staff is filling out any time off request sheets weeks in advance. Unless it's an emergency, if they come to me like, oh, by the way, over the weekend I scheduled a trip for me and my girlfriend, and so we're not going to be here next week. Sorry, it doesn't work that way because I need to make sure that I have my staff ratios where they need to be at. The other thing that we do, and my wife designed this, is we actually break down the day and staff assignments on who's doing what where. So this way they know exactly what they're doing at what time of the day they're doing it. And especially when you're doing field trips. If you're doing a field trip where you're leaving the building, you need to take in consideration that we have little children. So we need to make sure that, one, do they have all of their stuff? Do they have their shoes and their socks, their lunch boxes, their water bottles, whatever it is they're taking with them? Or have they gone to the bathroom? Because if you don't go to the bathroom before you go on a field trip, I promise you'll be doing the potty train. One of the kids will be like, I have to go to the bathroom. And then when you get there, 50 other kids will be like, I have to go to the bathroom. And then, unless you find a big convenience store, like here we have Buc-ee's in Texas, and they have like bathrooms that have like 50 stalls. That's completely different. But a lot of times you can't find those. And so doing a bathroom run is long and arduous, and we don't want that to happen. But this will kind of outline for you what you need to be doing and how you need to be prepping the day for your field trips, even when you get back from the field trips. As you're moving your part-time staff out for the day, full-time staff's coming back. Winter classes, you'll need to also schedule, when you're starting your class schedule in the afternoon, what kids are in class so that they're not overloading the instructors and they're getting good instruction. And do you have an overflow area where kids can go to? And if you don't, you may have to run a shorter camp. You may be able to run camp from like 7 to 3 or 4, so that you don't have kids just sitting around on the edge of the mat or the edge of the field not doing anything. You have to have a place and engagement for them to go to be engaged. Now, you can run camps a lot of different ways. You can, if you're running a sports camp, you can run it from like 8 to noon and 1 to 5, depending on what part of the country you're in. If you're doing full-time or part-time camps, you can run those from 7 to 6, 7 to 5, part-time camps 7 to 4, 7 to 3 or 4 o'clock. And then sleepover camps, a lot of times the kids are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week or 5 days a week, whatever that camp runs. So there's not really you can only do it this way. You do it according to what you have. I have some small academy owners that don't have an overflow room where they can take. I have 2 classrooms in my building, so I'm able to put kids back there and we can do academic creative building strategies, STEM stations, but other people don't have that. And I promise you, if you're trying to stack everybody on the floor, still trying to run class, it's not going to work. So if you have to run a shorter camp, you can still build that camp. Because remember, you want to look at it as, where am I going, right? So how am I going to scale it? And to scale it, you may have to have a bigger place. And if you're getting the numbers in that pays for itself, you can get a bigger location that could have a couple of classrooms to help you with that setup. So there's not really a one size fits all. We can fit it based upon what your needs are. So let's talk about a recap of what we've been over today. One is that I walk in your shoes every day. I'll never ask you to implement something, do something if I've not tested it in my own academy first. I just won't. And I think there's a lot of people in the industry that do that. They don't own their own academies, and they are, trying to, well, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. If I haven't tested it, I'm not going to tell you to do it, because then I'm not speaking intelligently to it. And on top of that, don't look at where my academy's at after 34 years and think you need to start there. You don't. You can start out, even if you only added in 10 summer campers a week at $200 a week. That's $2,000. If you run 10 weeks of camp, that's $20,000. But if you did that, let's say 30 kids or 40 kids, or the tuition was higher, you can do your own numbers and then look at how we're going to convert them out of the summer camp and move them over to a full-time program. And this is really super important to understand that. But you need to look at what your numbers are. What would an additional 10, 15, 20% revenue mean to your bottom line? My entire goal with my coaching clients is to help them build freedom inside of their academies and freedom for their families. Because I look at it a little differently. We start building an exit strategy. Now, that exit strategy may be 40 years down the road, but we start building exit strategies. And one thing I'll teach you this week is about a formula called EBITDA. And EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's a formula that's used by bankers and people that are selling businesses to get a true valuation of your business. When you have a recurring revenue business, then you get a 7x factor on the sale compared to a brick and mortar or somebody on an online business that's not doing recurring revenue. They get a 2.5x factor. So having a recurring revenue model built the way we build them drastically increases that investment return on that investment, because for most business owners, the majority of our money goes right back into the business as we're growing it. Now, over time, we start taking and diversifying our assets, diversifying into real estate and stocks and things of that nature. But to start off with, a lot of times, those first few years, that money's going right back into the academy to build it. It's your largest investment. So we want to make sure it's the right one. We want to make sure you're setting up your corporation for both your standard business, your for-profit business, as well as the nonprofit business. And the nonprofit's just going to open doors for you. It's going to open doors into marketing for the school districts. We have done this for years. We were able to drop flyers in the old Wednesday folders. We would print up 20 some odd thousand flyers and distribute to all the elementary schools and go from there. Now we use a system called Peach Jar. I'll talk about that in a day or two to really kind of help you utilize that situation. You want to understand state regulations. The last thing you want is to put all this money into building a program. You've not done your due diligence. You've not done your stuff. And then all of a sudden the state comes in, they shut you down. And you don't want that. And they fine you. Don't want that at all. Safety protocols. At the end of the day, we want to make sure we have great safety protocols and communication with the parents. Because I promise you, little Johnny or little Jimmy get hurt, and it could be something that could bruise their knee. It could be something small, skin their knee, right? By the time they get home and they've told that story, they've been attacked by a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was fighting with the Super Ninja Turtle and all kinds of stuff. And the parents mad because they weren't informed. So these are just want to make sure we have good safety protocols in place. Routines and schedules are massively important. I will tell you that all the years that I've done this, the only time kids freak out is when you've not communicated with them about schedules and then something changes, because they don't have the communication skills to say, I'm a little nervous about the schedule change today. Can you explain more to me? And so a lot of times they act out because they don't know how to manage those emotions. So we have schedules even for the kids, and we send those to the parents on I'll teach you a little bit later this week. We send those schedules to the parents on Friday, and we ask that the parents go over the schedule with the kids during the week. So when the kids come in on Monday morning, they know exactly where they're doing. And then we give them the schedule again on Monday morning. And I tell them that if we have to do a schedule change, something happens, bad weather, whatever, we're going to communicate that with you. And a lot of times we don't have the kids having those outbursts or those meltdowns because of a schedule change. So the more you can communicate those, the more relaxed your camps are going to be, less stress, less anxiety for you as the owner by having those routines and those schedules. And then we also talked about staffing for camps, where to go and where to get those people. Another thing I'll give you a little freebie is that if you want to hire good college students, use a system called Handshake. You can go on and look on and Handshake on Google, and it's actually, you can distribute a job posting and it hits multiple colleges in your area. You just pick the universities that you want to use, and we use that as well. But you can also go to the athletic programs, because a lot of times if they have a degree in, say, kinesiology or things of that nature, they're going to need to do some interning working with people. So if they can come and intern at your camp, you're getting somebody who's motivated because it's also a grade for them, and they're starting to learn, and you can coach them and teach them how to deal with coaching kids. All right, so one more time, if you guys want to invest in the VIP Backstage Pass, now what you can't see right now is that there's another probably 100 slides on here of all the things we're going to talk about over the next 5 days. So you can get your phone, you can scan that in, you can pay the $95, and it's getting you 5 hours of coaching For everybody who's in that, we'll actually start that here at 1 o'clock and just answer questions, go over the things we went over today and really drill down into that segment. And then you'll also get the challenge notes, slides, and you'll also get a post-group coaching call for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central. You get on with our group, and I'll go over the coaching for that day. Right now, we're heavily into summer camp and also for after school for next year. So you'll be able to go in there. It's about an hour's worth of time, and you'll get all that. And it's only $95. So I want to thank you guys for being here on day 1 of 5 days of Summer Camp Success Challenge. Congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back. You did an amazing job being here because you're doing what most people in their business won't do. And that's investing the time to learn on how to be more successful. I'll tell you a little quick story and then I'll end the day. So in 1983, my first years of college, I landed a cush job. I really wanted a cush job. It was just, I was able to land a job with a billionaire in San Antonio. And it was by circumstance and chance, right? And so I landed this job and I didn't really understand what I had in front of me. I knew the guy was wealthy, but I grew up poor, so I was kind of overwhelmed in the area. And so I remember that was in October of 83. In December of 83, I got a bunch of Christmas gifts for Christmas. Now let's fast forward to 1999. I got tired of seeing kids struggle, and we were sitting around one day and having the "I wish I'd have known that when I was younger" conversation, and I got tired of having it. So I happened to call up my old boss. His name was Red McCombs. Unfortunately, he passed a couple of weeks ago. I called him up and said, hey, I want to put this program together for kids so they can learn the things that you and I didn't learn growing up. And I said, what did you do to really change that narrative? And he said, I gave you something for Christmas when you first came to work for me. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, son, did you read it? And I had to have an embarrassing pause of, I got to the first chapter. And part of what it was is that when I was reading it, I couldn't relate to it because it's not the way I was raised. And he said, son, read the book. It changed my life. And it made me the man that I am today. So I'm highly recommending that you read, if you've not already done it, Think and Grow Rich. That book did change my life. But when I initially read it, I had to read it 2 or 3 times to finally get the concepts to really sink in. And then every year, it's on in the vehicle with me everywhere I'm going for at least a month. I'm going over it again. And I'm always picking up little nuggets again, remembering things that maybe I had pushed in the back of my subconscious mind. So the point is this: you invested in yourself on time in being here. I wasted 16 years of knowledge not tying into somebody that was ultra successful and ultra wealthy, because I was always told that I had to do it by myself. And not saying things would have been different, but I know my knowledge base would have been greater, and especially with everybody that he hung around with and all of those influences. It's about building that mastermind of people. So I hope that you guys will invest in the VIP, and I'll see you in the backstage. If not, tomorrow we're starting day 2 of the Success Challenge. We're going to give you a lot more information. We're going to feed you with a fire hose. So I want to thank you guys for being here and look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Have a successful day. Make sure you write your notes down. And if you got any questions, just hit me up in the Facebook pages and send some messages. If I don't respond, one of my staff will. You guys have a wonderful day today, and we will talk soon. Master Shill out.